This video is about how intelligent people deal with stupid people. And the first thing intelligent people understand is this: the moment you call someone stupid, you usually stop being intelligent about them. But before we get there, you click this with someone specific in mind. Don't even try to deny it. There's a face. There might be a name. Maybe it's someone at work. Maybe it's someone in your family, which is somehow worse because you can't even professionally distance yourself from them. They just show up at Christmas and say things. And look, I want to give that frustration its proper moment, because dealing with genuinely confusing people is exhausting in a way that's hard to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. So let's just name it. The person who gets given the simplest possible instruction, something so clear it basically comes with illustrations, and not only misunderstands it completely, but somehow becomes confident enough in their misunderstanding to start correcting everyone else. That person. Or the one who listened to a 45-minute podcast 2 weeks ago and now speaks with the authority of someone who has personally spent 30 years in the field. Well, actually, what the data shows, I heard several podcasts. That person, and this one is truly special, the person who turns every group project into a hostage situation, where somehow, mysteriously, every time work gets distributed, they end up holding the one piece everyone else needs to do literally anything, and they're working on it, and they've been working on it for 3 weeks. And at this point, the project is basically just waiting for this one person while they work on it. That person, and this one is a personal favorite, the person who asks a question, gets a clear answer, ignores it, asks the exact same question again 20 minutes later, ignores that answer too, and then somehow ends up blaming everyone else for never explaining it properly. A person so professionally committed to misunderstanding that you start to wonder if confusion is their actual hobby. That person, some of us have a full collection, and the standard advice for dealing with them is, honestly, not very good. Be patient. Cool. Already tried that. Pick your battles. Great, I've picked them. The battles are still happening. Just smile and nod. Very helpful. The smile and nod strategy has solved 0 problems in recorded history. But sure, let's add it to the list. None of this works, because none of it actually addresses what's happening in these moments. And I've thought about this more than I probably should, because here's what actually happens when you're in a conversation with someone whose thinking you cannot follow. First, there's the confusion. Wait, did they actually just? Yes, they did. Then there's the pause, the moment where you calculate whether engaging is worth the cost. Then, for most people, there's a quiet internal verdict: stupid. And I want to sit with that word for a second, because I'm not above it. I've issued that verdict with the confidence of a man who has himself walked into a meeting on the wrong day, argued about it for 5 minutes, and then checked his phone and gone very quiet. The verdict still happened. Sitting here telling you about it doesn't make me immune. That's kind of the point, because the verdict feels good. That's why we reach for it. It takes a messy, frustrating, confusing situation and compresses it into one clean word. It makes the other person the problem. It makes the conversation officially not worth having. It lets you close the tab, mentally, emotionally, and move on. Except here's the thing, nobody tells you about that verdict. The moment you file someone under stupid is the exact moment you stop trying to map how they think. And mapping how someone thinks, staying in the problem, tracing the root back, is where everything useful actually lives. The label doesn't just end the conversation out loud, it ends the conversation in your head, before it ever really had the chance to go anywhere. And this is where the science gets interesting, and slightly uncomfortable. There's a concept called the curse of knowledge. Once you understand something deeply, once it's so embedded in how you think that you can't imagine not knowing it, you lose the ability to remember what it felt like to not know it. The knowledge just becomes the water you swim in. And so when someone does something that makes no sense to you, you can't quite reconstruct the gap between what you know and what they know. You just see the result, which looks, from where you're standing, like stupidity, when really it might just be a different starting point, a different map entirely. This is why the most technically brilliant person on a team is often the worst at explaining anything to anyone. Not because they're bad at communicating, because they've forgotten, genuinely, structurally forgotten, what it feels like to not already understand this. The knowledge ate the memory of not having it, which is a very easy mistake to make, and a very costly one. There's a related finding called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Short version: The people who know the least about something often feel the most certain they understand it. The internet loves citing this, usually by someone explaining with complete confidence why everyone around them is wrong, which is, and I say this gently, exactly what Dunning-Kruger is about. The irony is structural, because the flip side, the part nobody mentions, is that genuine expertise comes with its own blind spot. Real competence makes you underestimate how hard your area is for people who haven't spent years in it. So on one end, people who know very little and are very sure they understand everything. On the other, people who know a great deal and can no longer see why it isn't obvious to everyone. And in the middle, everyone else, having conversations where both sides quietly think the other one is the problem. And here's the part that ruins the fun a little. Somewhere in someone else's life, you are that person. Not everywhere, not all the time, relax, but somewhere. There is a topic you speak about with more confidence than the evidence actually warrants. A situation you misread more consistently than you realize. A room where someone is nodding patiently and privately having thoughts about you that rhyme with exactly what you're thinking right now. And if that thought irritates you, good. That irritation is your ego noticing it just got included in the video. Which makes stupid a remarkably expensive verdict for creatures who are all operating with at least one significant blind spot they can't see. Calling someone stupid is basically the intellectual equivalent of rage quitting. It feels satisfying in the moment. It solves absolutely nothing. Now, here's where the actual strategy lives. Because I said this wasn't going to go the way you thought, and I've spent the last several minutes making you mildly uncomfortable about your internal jury. So let me give you something genuinely useful. Translation is power, not a soft skill, not a personality trait, not a virtue, power. Because the person who can translate controls the room, not the loudest person, not the most credentialed person, not the person with the most facts and the least ability to make them land. The person who can make different minds actually understand each other becomes the bridge everyone else has to cross. That is not a small thing, that is leverage. And translation only works if you stay with the puzzle, if you actually trace the route back to figure out how someone got where they got, instead of filing them under a word and never looking any further. Not agreement, not validation, just genuine interest in the machinery, the willingness to ask, even silently, how did you get there? And trace the path back, because almost always when you do that, you find something you didn't expect. Not that they're right, maybe they're completely wrong, but there's a logic in there somewhere, an experience that made this conclusion feel reasonable, a piece of information they have that you don't, or a piece they're missing that you forgot wasn't obvious. And once you locate the actual gap, instead of just labeling the result, you can do something about it, and you can be completely right about something and completely useless about it at the same time. The translation is what makes the difference, and the people who are genuinely good at this, they're not patient in the gritted teeth sense. They're not biting their tongue. They're not being the bigger person. They find it genuinely interesting how different people construct reality. And that interest isn't charity, it's strategy. Because when you actually understand how someone thinks, even someone whose thinking frustrates you, you can communicate with them, influence them, work around them in ways that are simply not available to someone who stopped at stupid and never looked any further. The person who issues the verdict gets the comfort of feeling right. The person who stays with the puzzle gets actual results, and those two things are not the same. So, the person you had in mind at the start of this video, maybe they're still wrong, maybe they're still exhausting, maybe they genuinely should not be allowed near a group project without some form of adult supervision. But are they stupid, or did you just find a word that let you stop thinking? Because that's the uncomfortable part. Sometimes stupid isn't an observation, it's an escape route. The easy exit from a problem that would have been interesting if you'd stayed with it long enough. And intelligent people don't take the easy exit. They stay with the puzzle, even when the puzzle is annoying. Even when the puzzle once asked the same question 4 times in a single afternoon. They stay with it, because that's not patience, that's power. And if this video made you slightly uncomfortable about how quickly you reach for that verdict, good. I made 2 videos that are going to make it worse. The first is about why the smarter you get, the more miserable you tend to become. Which sounds like bad news. It is bad news, but it's interesting bad news. And the second is about how, In a world drowning in information, most of us are somehow getting dumber. Not them. Us. Both are right there. Watch one, watch both. Either way, stay with the puzzle.